You know, for a book called The Queen's Man, neither queen feature very much in this. The Queen's Man by Rory Clements is a historical thriller about a plot to depose Queen Elizabeth I and place her cousin Mary Queen of Scots on the throne. This is the first in the John Shakespeare series, who is the fictitious older brother of William Shakespeare, in the employ of the Royal Secretary and Spy Master Sir Francis Walsingham. When possible plans to free Mary from her imprisonment at Sheffield Castle come to light, John Shakespeare is sent out to find the truth. But little does he know that this task will lead him back to his hometown of Stratford to investigate his own friends and family. First of all, it's clear that a lot of research went into this book. There is a lovely author's notes at the end which details the various historical figures who appear in the book, including Somerville, Thomas Arden and Hugh Hall. Although the overall plot is obviously fictitious, it is drawn from real events, so it reads as very plausible. There were several plots to overthrow Elizabeth in favour of Mary, so it isn't hard to let yourself believe that this plot could have been one of them. I also liked the way the religious divide was handled. A lot of the Elizabeth versus Mary schism was due to religion, the Protestantism versus Catholicism, which provides the backdrop for a lot of English history, and the way the power and politics used this tension. So neither side is painted as completely good or completely bad, with good and evil deeds being performed by everyone. It is also a very thrilling plot with some pretty good twists. John Shakespeare is a good main character. He's very clever, but he's not physically strong, so he does get beaten up a lot. And he isn't perfect, he makes mistakes and gets things wrong, which is just nice to see. So he's not like perfect, knows everything, always does the right thing all the time. There are also a lot of like nasty characters, and it's very pleasing when they get the comeuppance, so that's nice. And finally, there were some pretty decent descriptions. A lot of attention is given to things like the food and the smells and the colours of the time. And there's some very evocative imagery. It doesn't shy away from the gore and the violence which would have been rife in the Elizabethan era, but it isn't gratuitous. So I think it's quite a good middle ground. So despite the nice description, the rest of the writing was a little bland and had a bit too much telling over showing. It is very much written inside characters' heads and includes their direct thoughts, so I can understand a little bit more telling than showing than in other books, but I do think there was too much in this one. It also kept breaking out of POVs, which obviously I really don't like, especially at the end of chapters, often to build tension, but I just found it very jarring. For example, there's a scene where John Shakespeare is talking to Thomas Lucy, I think, and then he leaves. But then we suddenly snap out of his POV to reveal that someone had been eavesdropping on the conversation, and soon Shakespeare would realise, and it wouldn't be very good. Except it doesn't really impact anything. I mean, it explains how the eavesdropper knew something, but I wouldn't have minded not knowing how he knew it. All it does is mean he says a line and Shakespeare thinks, how did you know that? And that's it, that's all the impact it has, so it was just pointless. I guess like, you know, dramatic irony or whatever it's called, but it didn't really work. The plot also took quite a long time to become interesting. Honestly, I was a little bored for the first 100 pages or so, and I wasn't really invested until Shakespeare reached Stratford. Once you get to that point, it is quite thrilling, but the first part is dull, which is a shame. And there were various moments where the tension was just lost because half the cast are actual historical figures. Like, oh, I wonder if William Shakespeare and his fiancée Anne Hathaway will survive. Considering, you know, they aren't married yet and Shakespeare hasn't written a word for the stage, I think they'll be okay. Although at one point I did wonder if William Shakespeare was going to get killed off because John Shakespeare kept having thoughts about, this is just like a playwright had written this. And I thought, is he going to become William Shakespeare? Is he going to write the plays for? But that didn't happen, thankfully. And a lot of the other characters aren't afforded enough by way of goals or dreams or life ahead for them to really conjure any worry whether or not they'll survive. I mean, with Bill and Anne, you know, yeah, she wants to get married and they've got a life ahead of them and she's pregnant, so it would be genuinely tragic if one of them or both of them was to die, but we know they're not going to die. With other characters, you don't really care, because there's nothing for them to look forward to. Following on from that, some of the motives felt a little bit confused or just taped on last minute. Finally, I had some issue with the way the women were written. They suffer the same issue as other characters in not really having any clear goals or wants, and so felt a little empty. But on top of that, they didn't really do anything. We only have a few female characters that aren't in the background. You have Anne Hathaway, Audrey and Florence Angel, and Kat. Audrey Angel is a widow and depressed. She gets sick and basically becomes the vulnerable object to protect, to sort of raise the stakes at the finale. Florence is just sort of a bit mad, and that's it. She sometimes delves into the realms of being unhelpful or hostile, but by the end she's also there just to be vulnerable and raise the stakes. Anne Hathaway is kind of bland, actually, and comes across almost as a trophy. A lot of the tension in Stratford is between William Shakespeare and Badger Wrench, because Badger, who's like the Gaston of the town, fancied her, but then William got her pregnant and now they're going to get married, and he feels like she's been stolen from him. And Will is often like congratulated by other men for procuring her because she's like the most beautiful girl in the village and all that. And I know that women probably were treated like objects back in those days, but Anne doesn't have to act like one. And then there's Kat. At first, Kat is described as beautiful and nothing else. She's the daughter of the innkeeper. She's polite to patrons and responds to flirting good-naturedly, but is constantly ogled at by all the men. Then, minor spoilers, she decides to follow Shakespeare on his mission because she is a woman scorned and wants revenge, which, whilst not being the most original motive, is at least something to drive her. We then, in between mentions of her beauty, get the odd description of her as spirited, and I thought, great, a feisty, spunky young woman on her way to avenge her broken heart by breaking someone's face. However, it quickly became clear that by spirited they meant promiscuous. The sort of character that could have been really interesting was reduced to just beautiful and sleeps with people, especially Shakespeare, because, of course. Then her motive was robbed from her. She lied, her heart wasn't broken, she just wanted to see Shakespeare again, because main character. Another motive was tacked on, her wanting to leave Sheffield and see other places, but even that felt like it was a motive given to her by other characters, and not something that came from her. So in short, all women in this are either sad, mad, bland, or bad. Issues aside, this is a fun read. It's not amazing by any stretch, but it's not a bad way to fill a few empty hours. So if this is your sort of thing, check it out. And I just really appreciated how much research had gone into this, judging by all the author's notes at the end, which includes a transcript of the Spiritual Testament, which is a Catholic document pledging their soul to the faith, written and signed by Shakespeare's own father, so that's quite cool. So if you like historical thrillers or are interested in the Elizabethan reign or Mary Queen of Scots, you might enjoy this. Or if you're looking to get into history but aren't up to tackling like a textbook or a 2-hour documentary, this could be a gentler introduction to the era and the religious tension, but just don't take it as gospel. There's also a short story in this edition, which I haven't read because I didn't really want to read it straight away. I might read it later. But that's it for this one. Next time I'm looking at another historical book, but not a thriller. So that would be fun. So yeah. Bye.